let's begin the final session for this weekend retreat, and we'll begin again with a meditation. And I want to return to the earlier practice we did of resting in awareness. Now, with resting in awareness, when we rest in awareness, awareness is still, it's open, it's spacious, it's limitless. But there still can be a tendency when we're resting in awareness to really contract around that awareness, and particularly having a sense that awareness is some small thing inside of our head. So to overcome that contraction and that false idea that awareness is something inside of our head, I'd like to do a practice called merging mind with space. It's a little bit like a mental gymnastics to break down that false grasping onto the awareness. And here we'll use this practice as described again by this great Indian master Padmasambhava. And he says the following here: while steadily gazing into the space in front of you, without meditating on anything, steadily concentrate your consciousness without wavering. So we saw the standard instruction there of resting your gaze in the space in front of you without meditating on anything, meaning not focusing on any appearances, simply resting in awareness without wavering, without getting distracted. Now he says the following. He says, steadily direct your attention up into the sky. Steadily focus your awareness with the desire to be without anything on which to meditate. Relax again. So the first stage is then from that resting in awareness is direct attention upwards as far as you can go. So we're not visualizing, imagining, just simply direct attention upwards as far as you can go. And we'll keep that attention there and then relax again. Just let the awareness relax again. And then he says, steadily, unwaveringly direct your attentions into the space on your right. So then direct your attention out to your right as far as you can go, and then relax again. And then direct it out to the left and relax again. And then direct it downwards as far as you can go into space and relax again. And then allow your awareness, he says, let your mind come to rest in the center of your heart and evenly leave it there. So then allow your awareness, which is probably still centered somewhere around here, allow your awareness to descend. So we're not looking downwards, we're not imagining downwards, but simply relax so deeply and allow your awareness to descend to that point, to the center of your chest, the level of your heart. And leave it there. Just stay there. And then it says, evenly bring your mind into the expanse of space and leave it there. Then we'll just release the awareness out into space and leave it there. So it's a little bit mental gymnastics to break down this sort of contraction around awareness, this false sense awareness is a little thing inside of our head. So let's do that practice now. Setting the body into a state of relaxation, stillness, and vigilance. Softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed. The breathing flowing naturally and effortlessly. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest. Resting in awareness itself. Relaxed, still, and clear. And now from this stillness, direct your attention up into space as far as you can go. And then relax again. Resting in stillness. And now direct your attention out into space to your right, as far as it can go. And relax again. Resting in stillness. And now direct your awareness out into space to your left, as far as it can go. And then relax again. Resting in awareness. Now direct your awareness downwards into space, as far as it can go. And relax again. Resting in stillness. And now allow awareness to descend to the center of the chest. Resting there in awareness. And now release your awareness into the vast expanse of space in all directions. And leave it there. Relaxed, still, and clear. So we can bring the meditation to a close. In this session, we'll now begin by reviewing again those 6 prerequisites that we briefly mentioned in the first session yesterday. Then we'll have a look at what could be a supporting worldview for this practice. Then we'll be looking at how to set up the day, particularly with respect to this shamatha practice we looked at this weekend. The meditation will be to help us to build a vision for this life. What would really make our life meaningful? Time for some question and answer. And then a little preview, short preview of the 3 upcoming retreats in this series. And then finally, we'll finish with a dedication for the weekend retreat. These 6 prerequisites, which are very nicely explained in Attention Evolution from page 49 to 55, and he titles this section, Preparing for an Expedition. These 6 prerequisites are often described in the meditation texts as the prerequisites that one would need if one wanted to go off into solitude and really do a quite extensive sort of shamatha retreat. However, when we look at them, we can understand that even if we're not engaging in some sort of extensive shamatha retreat, then these 6 prerequisites, I think if we can get these 6 prerequisites, then that would really help us to set up a basis for any sort of meaningful life. So let's have a look at these 6 prerequisites. The first is the so-called outer condition. It's the supportive environment. And often there are 5 items mentioned here in having a supportive environment. So again, this is normally in the context of someone going off somewhere to do some extensive retreat. So the first one is talking about easy access to sort of water and food and so forth. And also to be in a safe place. And sometimes in the old text, it talks about where there's no sort of predators or no lions and tigers present, because in the old days, sometimes they used to go and meditate in the forest. It was a bit of a dangerous place to go, so not a good idea. And then a healthy place, so a place not with disease and so forth. And then good friends, to have some like-minded people around you to help support you. And then, of course, to meditate in a quiet place. And the one I want to really just mention a little bit more in the first one is this idea of good friends. And that's something that is, I think, very important, and that will come up again shortly, is in Buddhism this idea of sangha, of spiritual community. That if we really want to sort of change the direction of our life and lead a more meaningful life, then often we're going against the current, because modern society seems to be driving us in a particular direction. And if we want a sort of more meaningful life, we tend to be sort of heading against that current. And so if we try and do that on our own, my experience in talking to many people, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible. So if we really want to do these sorts of things, then we, particularly as a beginner, we need help. We need to find like-minded people, get connected with them, and help support each other. And then we can really make some forward progress. And then the other 5 are more to do with inner conditions. The next 2 are really come together, having few desires and being content. And this is really with respect to material possessions and wealth and so forth. And few desires is with respect to the things we don't have, and being content is with respect to the things we do have. So if we don't have these 2 prerequisites, then we're probably going to be putting a lot of time and energy in trying to accumulate more wealth and possessions and a better house and so forth. And we'll never be content, and we'll have lots of craving and desires. And then, of course, meditation is out the window. And then the 4th one is few activities. We mentioned this a little bit more earlier, I think, in the first session. to really simplify our life. Now, many of us, of course, in the modern world have very busy lives. We never have enough time for anything. And for meditation, I often hear people say, oh, I really like to meditate, but I don't have time to meditate. I think that's never a valid excuse. The reality is, of course, many of us have very busy lives. We never have enough time for everything. Some of the things we do each day are essential. Most of us need to work at some level to have enough finances to support ourselves. And maybe some of us have family responsibilities and some other responsibilities. But above and beyond those essential activities that we engage in, then we tend to fill up our day with lots of things. And often they really don't bring us very much. And one of the main reasons we tend to fill up our day with things is it's often felt like in the modern society, if we're not doing something, we're not being productive. So just do something. And so we do something, we just fill up our day. And of course, if we're not doing anything, we're sitting quietly, that really sort of forces us to look at the state of our mind, which often is a bit of a mess. And so we don't like what we see. So we just busy ourselves to distract ourselves. We can, of course, forcibly cut things out of our life to try and simplify our life. But I think this is going to be a struggle. It's not really going to work. Rather, what in the Buddhist traditions, what they recommend is some of the very first things to reflect on is precious human life and death. That if we really reflect on the fact that we've got a precious human life full of opportunities and that it's not going to last forever, then we're going to have an aspiration to want to make our life meaningful. Otherwise, we don't tend to appreciate things until we've lost it or about to lose it. And so we can circumvent that by doing these reflections to really understand we've got a wonderful opportunity to make our life meaningful and how to do that. And then on those basis of those reflections, then a lot of these things that we fill up our day with that don't really bring us anything, we're simply going to lose interest in them. They're going to drop away. Then we're suddenly going to have more time and space for meditation and to developing ourselves as a person and to helping others as well. And then the fifth one is ethical discipline. So we saw that ethics is the basis of all Buddhist traditions. And I think it's really the basis of any sort of meaningful lifestyle. And here in Attention Revolution, Alan Wallace is not only talking about social ethics, which often ethics is described in terms of avoiding harmful behavior, but he also talks about environmental ethics and psychophysical ethics in terms of being ethical treatment, having ethical treatment of our own body and mind. And then the last one, to let go of compulsive thinking. Many of us, particularly in the modern world, are caught up in a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking. And so that, of course, is going to be a big interference in terms of any sort of meditation practice, certainly shamatha practice. So really to let go of that as much as possible. And here we have from Tsongkhapa, he says, the most important ones are good ethical discipline, seeing desires as disadvantageous and dwelling in appropriate area. So dwelling in an appropriate area, again, I think one of the key elements here is to have those like-minded friends around us to help support us. And of course, ethics is the basis. And seeing desires as disadvantageous is really important that we look at our worldview. And that's what's going to come up in the next slide, is that if our worldview is that the source of my happiness and the source of my suffering is out there in the world, then we're not going to be able to have these, any of these really, these prerequisites. And certainly we'll have a lot of desires because we'll be chasing after all that stuff out there that seems to be giving us happiness, and we'll never be content with what we have. We're going to have a very hectic, busy life chasing after all of those things. And so we really need to shift our worldview to really appreciate that the source of happiness and suffering is not out there anywhere, it lies within our own mind. And if we can make that shift, then we'll be able to have this few desires in terms of material possessions and being content, more simple lifestyle and so forth. And on that point, I'd just like to read what Alan Wallace talks about at the end of his section in Attention Revolution in these 6 prerequisites. On page 54, he says, in our material society, even for people who are drawn to non-materialistic values, there is a strong tendency to take our current way of life as the norm and then add meditation to fix it, like a band-aid applied to a festering wound. My first experience with meditation in the late 1960s is a good example. I went to a teacher who gave me a mantra and told me how to meditate on it. But in these instructions, there was no reference to the way I should lead the rest of my life. Even now, decades later, meditation is often taught with little or no reference to any of the above prerequisites. It has been reduced to a kind of first aid to alleviate the symptoms of a dysfunctional life, with all its anxieties, depression, frustration, and emotional vacillations. For a mind that is assaulted with a myriad of mental afflictions, such as craving, hostility, and delusion, we need more than a medic. We need long-term intensive care. That's what this training is all about. So let's have a look now at how we can really set up a supporting worldview that really can help make this shamatha practice effective and meaningful. So as I mentioned, if we have a worldview that the source of happiness and suffering is outside, is out there, then we're going to tend to equate pleasure with happiness and pain with suffering. And it's all about what happens to us, what we can get from the world. And the world will not really seem very user-friendly because there's going to be a lot of unpleasant, painful things coming our way. And therefore, as Alan Wallace mentioned, if this is our worldview, then often shamatha practice becomes what's called, someone coined a term some years ago, mindfulness, like the fast food of meditation, like McDonald's, is that we will simply use mindfulness to soothe our mental afflictions, to try and soothe our dysfunctional lifestyle. And so that's not really going to be very effective. In fact, if we simply apply mindfulness to that dysfunctional life without shifting our perspective, our worldview, it could actually make things worse, because we could simply become more mindful in trying to cheat people and deceive people and so forth. And then we're just going to have more problems. And then also with this sort of worldview, then we're going to be very lazy when it comes to meditating. We're not going to have any time to meditate because we're going to be too busy chasing after those pleasant things that seem to be the source of our happiness, and too busy trying to avoid those unpleasant situations that seem to be suffering for us. Whereas if we can shift that worldview and really appreciate the source of happiness and suffering is within our own mind, then we'll see that pleasure is not equivalent to happiness and pain is not equivalent to suffering. So it's not about what we can get from the world, but how we respond to what happens to us. And so it's more about what we can bring to the world, and then the world will see as very user-friendly, because we can always bring things, even when things are difficult. And from that perspective, then shamatha practice is going to be very meaningful, because it's going to be the gateway to that genuine happiness. And therefore, we're going to have a lot of enthusiasm to meditate, to develop ourselves and so forth. How to cultivate that view of genuine happiness, then, as we saw in these 6 prerequisites, some of the first reflections that are going to be very helpful is to reflect on precious human life and death. Because if we can really reflect on these and internalize these and experientially see, we've got this wonderful opportunity, it's not going to last forever, let's make our life meaningful while we still have this opportunity. Otherwise, we're probably going to take our life for granted, and we're going to really waste our life. And on that point, I'd like to read a little bit from a talk that Steve Jobs, and I think you all know who Steve Jobs was, a talk that Steve Jobs gave some years ago to students at Stanford University. And he said the following: When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me. And since then, for the past 33 years, I have looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I'm about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations or pride or fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you're going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. You are already naked. There is no reason not to follow your heart. So how do we then make our life meaningful if we develop that aspiration? So again, one of the next reflections is to really reflect on where is the source of suffering, where is the source of happiness? And so if we can really reflect on those and shift our worldview to really appreciate the underlying source of happiness and suffering is not out there, but lies within our own mind, then we will be able to strive for that genuine happiness through doing this shamatha and vipassana practices and so forth. And we're going to talk more about detail. There'll be more detail about this sort of reflection on suffering and its causing and shifting worldview in the upcoming retreats, in the compassion and the vipassana retreats. And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of cultivating this view of genuine happiness and making a life meaningful, the importance of like-minded friends. I can't overemphasize this enough based on my own experience and talking to so many people, that as a beginner, we're very easily influenced by others. We tend to have not so very good habits. And so my experience was that when I got interested in these sorts of ideas, and at the time I went back and I was living in Australia, there was no Buddhist center anywhere in the vicinity. There was no other people interested in doing anything like this. So I was on my own. But I really wanted to make my life meaningful. I wanted to meditate each day. I wanted to shift the direction of my life. But basically for 2 years, nothing happened because I just got swept up in my old habits, no matter how much I wanted to change the direction of my life. And it was only after 2 years that I found myself in another environment with like-minded friends that I managed to start to do something. So we need those like-minded friends to help us, to protect us and to help nurture these ideas. So very, very important. And if we can really develop this view of genuine happiness, then on that basis, that will really inspire us to have an ethical lifestyle. And then in those prerequisites, it's going to be much more easy to have few material desires, to be content, to have with what the things we have, to simplify our life and to really let go of compulsive thinking. Because a lot of our compulsive thinking is about the future, is about those things that seem to be the source of my happiness. How can I get them? How can I avoid those other things that seem to be the source of my suffering? So a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking is about those sorts of things. And so if we can let go of that, then we can let go of a lot of this compulsive thinking. And then also then we can really integrate our career with the view. So it's not like if we develop a view of genuine happiness, we have to abandon our career. I think that's not a good idea, because if we do that, how are we going to financially support ourselves? And if the career is the one thing we're good at and we give it up and we think we'll have a spiritual life, we'll go and live in a cave somewhere, then we've given up the one thing that we can do to benefit the world. So rather integrate career with view. And then no matter what our career, no matter what our job, it can be very meaningful. And it's all about what we can bring to the world. And then we'll have a lot of enthusiasm. This will bring us a lot of enthusiasm, and we'll really be able to see difficult situations as opportunities. with the worldview that the source of suffering is coming from out there, then difficult situations are definitely problems. We don't want them. We're just going to have aversion and get overwhelmed by them. Whereas if we have the worldview, source of happiness is within, then we'll be able to see these difficult situations as opportunities and will help us to develop ourselves as a person. Now, how to set up our day in terms of this practice. I think it's very helpful and important to start the day with a good motivation. And here that I have a motivation from His Holiness Dalai Lama, who says, every day, think as you wake up, I'm going to benefit others as much as I can. I think if we can really begin our day with that motivation, that's really going to set ourselves up for the day in a very good way. And in terms of, we saw in terms of practice, there are always two parts to practice. There's meditation and integrating into daily life. In terms of meditation, then it's recommended the best time to do that is first thing in the morning, because it's where we generally are most fresh. We can dedicate some time, and it's also a very good way to start the day. And particularly as a beginner, it's very helpful to meditate at the same time every day. Because one of the most difficult things, challenging things initially, is just to develop the habit. And if we're meditating at different times each day, we're not really developing a habit. Whereas if we pick a time that works for us and stick to that time, then we start to develop a habit. And once we've developed a habit, it becomes easier to do a daily meditation practice. And as I've already mentioned earlier in the earlier session, to really emphasize quality over quantity in terms of how long we meditate in the morning. And here in terms of shamatha practice, we've looked at these three objects in the last retreat and this retreat of the breath, the mind awareness, and of course also in this retreat we looked at the stillness in motion. So to use the object that works best for you as your shamatha practice to really establish that basis of cultivating attention skills, of cultivating a calm, clear, focused mind. Of course, it would be best to have an integrated approach to not just do shamatha, but so far in these retreats, I haven't really discussed the other two main elements of practice of compassion and wisdom, and they'll come in the coming 3 retreats. And so then ideally, we would have a morning meditation practice that would cover these 3 elements of first shamatha, of cultivating a stable, clear, focused mind, and then on that basis, then engaging in developing our heart in terms of compassion practice, developing our head, our wisdom in terms of vipassana practice. And I'll talk about how to do that in the later retreats. And then during the day, how to bring particularly this shamatha practice, particularly the ones that we did in this retreat of observing the mind and resting in awareness. The way we bring shamatha into daily life in general is to bring mindfulness, to continue to cultivate mindfulness through the day, to seed the day with mindfulness. And to help us as a beginner, it can be helpful to use triggers. We can, in the morning, say simply, I'm going to be as mindful as possible for the whole day. But probably after 5 minutes, we've forgotten that. Rather, it's helpful to use triggers as a beginner to remind us to be mindful. And triggers can take many different forms. One particular trigger is whenever we find ourselves caught up in any agitation or tension, then we stop whatever we do and then do a little mindfulness exercise. Or another thing is certain actions we do each day, such as eating meals, brushing teeth, and so forth, is that to make a strong determination whenever we do those particular actions to be fully present with those actions, and thereby cultivating and strengthening mindfulness. And also we can use modern technology to help us. There are a number of apps, mindfulness apps that we can program to give us a bell at regular intervals during the day. And then when we hear that bell, just stop whatever we do and do a little mindfulness exercise. And here, based on this weekend shamatha retreat, when we do those little mindfulness exercise throughout the day, we can either stop and simply observe our mind, what's going on in our mind for 5 seconds, or rest in stillness for 5 seconds. Make it short, because if you make it too long, you're not going to do it. And then to really develop in the day this new default mode that we mentioned in terms of resting and awareness practice, this resting in stillness rather than this tight, constricted mind. So really, from time to time throughout the day, just really emphasizing that resting in stillness. And also what can be very helpful here is to be in the senses, that whenever we're doing any sort of physical activity, be fully present in the senses. And that can really help us to let go of obsessive compulsive thinking, because often we're doing some sort of physical activity and thinking about all sorts of other things. But if we are fully present in that physical activity, such as walking or eating or so forth, then that can really help to let go of it. And also a mindfulness exercise. And also based on the observing the mind, observing thoughts, shamatha practice, then to bring that into daily life, then to really adopt this witnessing mode in terms of what's called open awareness. That is, in any given moment, be aware of whatever's appearing in our mind, sensory or mental, and then to simply observe that. And rather than get caught up and react to it, then we can respond to the things we need to respond. And then at the end of the day, it can be very helpful also to review our day. How did our day go? And then to pick one positive thing we did during the day, and then to really be happy, to rejoice in having done that, and make a strong determination to continue to do those good actions the next day. In that way, we can strengthen our positive habits. And then also pick one negative thing we did during the day, one not so good thing, and then really have some sincere regret for having done that negative thing, and make a strong determination not to do that the following day. In that way, we can weaken the negative habits. And then also, I think it can be very helpful to think about one thing we received during the day, and then really have gratitude for having received that thing, because we tend to take things for granted. And rather, if we can have this sense of gratitude that we receive so much in every day, that can really help shift our day as well. And to see how fortunate we are. So that's a few things on how to set up the day. And in each of the coming retreats, we'll sort of build on this as we go through the compassion and vipassana retreats as well. And so what I'd like to do now is the meditation. And the meditation is a meditation building a vision for this life, to really help us to reflect on what do we really want to do in this life? What is going to make our life meaningful, and how can we achieve those goals in this life, to really shift our focus towards a more meaningful life. So let's do that practice now. As always, we begin by setting up a nice, comfortable posture. And allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed. The breathing flowing naturally and effortlessly. and allowing the mind to come to rest in the present moment. Simply resting in awareness itself. Resting in stillness. Now, no matter how much mental afflictions are in our mind, that is, no matter how much craving and attachment, anger and jealousy, fear and anxiety, and so on are in our mind, these mental afflictions are not part of the nature of our mind. They're merely like dirt covering the surface of our mind. And beneath these mental afflictions is the natural purity of our mind. So we can imagine this inner purity of our mind in the form of a small, white, radiant sphere of light in the center of our chest at the level of our heart. And we can begin to build a vision for this life by reflecting on 4 points. And the first point is, what are your deepest aspirations in this life? What is your heart's desire? What would you really like to achieve in this life? And try to picture those deepest aspirations very clearly. And then arouse the thought, may I realize my deepest aspirations in this life. And then with each out-breath, imagine rays of light radiating out from the sphere of light at your heart, filling and saturating your entire body and mind, imagining that your deepest aspirations are being fulfilled right here and now. Now, in order to help you fulfill your deepest aspirations, what kinds of material assistance would you like to receive from the world around you? And what kinds of friendship and guidance would you like to receive from the people around you? And then arouse the thought, may I receive everything that I need to help me realize those deepest aspirations. And then with each in-breath, imagine reality rising up in the form of white light, streaming in from all directions, and providing you with everything you need. Now, the help that we receive from the world around us is not enough for us to realize the genuine happiness that we seek. For this, inner transformation is essential. So, how would you like to transform and evolve as a person? What faults would you like to be free of? And what qualities would you like to cultivate and possess? And then arouse the aspiration, may I cultivate the true causes of my own fulfillment. And then with each out breath, imagine the white light radiating out from the sphere of light at your heart, filling your body and mind, imagining that you're actually becoming that person with those qualities and free of those faults right here and now. And then finally, for the sake of your own fulfillment and to make your life as meaningful as possible, what would you truly love to offer to the world using your own unique talents? And then with each out breath, imagine the white light of loving kindness radiating out from your heart in all directions as you actualize this offering to the entire world, right here and now. And then releasing all appearances and allow the mind to come to rest. Resting in that inner purity of your mind. Which is in the nature of loving kindness. And so we can bring the meditation to a close. And we've got some time for question answer now. So anyone have any questions? Doesn't seem like too many questions, or maybe.
So hi, Glenn.
Atul, yes.
This is Atul. Hi. So again, a question on resting in awareness. So I've noticed that when I do this practice, there is a hum in the background. It's like there's a gum kind of a hum in the background, and sometimes I then start to just focus on that hum rather than the knowingness of awareness. So is that the right practice? If and it happens through the day, that this hum is there when I'm watching myself. So how does one deal with that?
Yeah. Without hope and fear. So if we're resting in awareness, then we're not paying attention to any appearance. So if we are focusing on a hum or a sound or this or that, then we're not doing the resting in awareness practice. So if you notice the hum, then just let it be there and don't really pay it any attention. Just stay with the resting in awareness. And with, like I said, without hope and fear, because often when those sorts of things happen, for example, sometimes people are meditating and then some song starts playing in their head and they go, oh no, either they follow it and get caught up in it, or they go, oh, not that song again, go away, go away. And of course, that's a guarantee that it's going to stay there. So if you want it to go away, it's going to stay. So whatever's there, just really ignore it. Just stay with that. And if it's there, it's okay. If it's not there, it's also okay. Just have this sort of it's okay attitude. So yeah, so that just let that go and come back. In daily life, then if you find that focusing on that hum is giving you a grounding and anchoring to avoid a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking, then you can use it as a little bit of an anchor in daily life. Similarly, sometimes a recommendation is that to use the breath as a little bit of an anchor in daily life for that purpose. So that's okay to do that in that case.
Okay. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah.
Sure.
Hi, Glenn. Pamela here.
Hi, Pamela.
With the merging mind with space practice that we did earlier, I found I was often wavering between whether I was focusing my attention on what was above me or below me or on my heart, or whether I was placing my awareness there.
Yeah, I mean, attention is awareness. I mean, it's the same thing.
Right. So I was confused about whether it's actually what's in that space that you're focusing on, or you're actually focusing on your heart rather than a more abstract sense of expanding your awareness.
Yeah, so that merging mind with space is really sort of like a mental gymnastics. It's to really release the sort of contraction that we have around awareness, that particularly, you know, some small thing inside of our head, or it's located here or there. I mean, from a Buddhist perspective, it's not located anywhere because it's non-physical. It has no spatial properties. So this sort of moving awareness up, right, left, down, and so forth is really about sort of releasing that grasping, just to have that openness of just simply resting in awareness and not allowing awareness to sort of collapse down and to contract around it. That's all. So, and the moving the down from the heart, I think has a specific purpose from a Buddhist context. I mean, normally we feel it's the awareness is in our head, usually for two reasons. One is that materialists tell us that the mind is the brain, and so definitely the brain is there. So if we believe the materialists that the mind is the brain, then of course the mind is here. And the other one is that most of our sense faculties are located here. And so therefore we have a sense that the mind is somewhere just in behind the sense faculties. And so then to drop it down from there can get us out of that false sense of the awareness there. But specifically the center of the chest is a very specific point when we go into the sort of the tantric level of practice. It's where what's called the heart chakra. So that's a very powerful point of focus. And so then bringing it down and out from there has a little bit of a significance in that sense from the tantric perspective. Okay. Any other questions?
Glenn, I have one question, Mikkel from Copenhagen, regarding the choice of the object. Personally, I've quite comfortably been focusing on the breath for some years now. I mean, most of my practice have been shamatha of the breath,
Sure.
paying attention to the sensations in the nostrils. And so on one hand, I'm quite content continuing that practice, and on the other hand, I'm also curious to explore, especially the awareness of awareness practice. I'm just curious about how to integrate these practices.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said there, but I'll try and be brief. Is that certainly since you have some experience in the shamatha practice of the breath, then I think on that basis, then it'd be better, easier to engage in the resting in awareness practice. So then I would recommend spending some time with the resting in awareness practice, to use that for some time, you know, maybe some weeks or so, or even longer, just to see where that takes you in terms of a shamatha practice. But then also, I think in terms of using an object for shamatha, you'd have to look a little bit as well as what sort of system of practice that you are following, because for some systems of practice, it would be more helpful to use the breath, and for others, it would be more helpful to use the resting in awareness. For example, in Tibetan Buddhism, in the Mahamudra Dzogchen traditions, the resting in awareness would be a better one in terms of, in Vipassana, we use nature of mind. And so then there's a stronger correlation there. Whereas maybe in some of the Theravada traditions, probably it would be more appropriate and conducive and helpful to use the breath in conjunction with other Vipassana practices and so forth. So you'd have to look a little bit at the bigger picture as well. But certainly each of those two different shamatha practices has their own unique benefits as well. So it would be helpful to be competent in both of those practices. But then if you really wanted to engage in a sort of a longer term shamatha retreat to really, go far in the shamatha path, then you would, at some point, you would need to pick an object and sort of stick with that. But before that, I think it can be helpful to become competent in both of those practices.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Is there a question in the chat there, or maybe not? Okay. So then let's go on to a preview of the upcoming retreats. So this is the second of 5 retreats. So this is the second of the 2 shamatha retreats. So we've covered the 3 main objects that we want to cover for the shamatha: the breath, the observing thoughts, and resting in awareness. So the next retreat in 3 weeks' time is covering the compassion aspect of the practice. And here we'll be covering these 4 qualities of loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity. And also in that context, we're looking at how to deal with anger and attachment, and also how to transform self-centeredness. And the recommended reading for that is 4 Immeasurables from Alan Wallace. And then following that, the last 2 retreats are dealing with the wisdom practice, and sometimes called Vipassana practice. In the first of those 2 retreats, we'll be focusing on Vipassana practice as it's more practiced within the Theravada Buddhist traditions, where they really focus on these 3 marks of existence of impermanence, suffering, no self. And in the second of the 2 Vipassana retreats, we'll be looking at this wisdom of emptiness, which is more emphasized in the Mahayana Buddhist traditions. And there we'll be looking at both what's the classic emptiness of person practice, but also nature of mind practice that we often see in the Mahamudra and Dzogchen traditions. And the recommended reading for that is How to See Yourself as You Really Are. It's a very good book on emptiness for beginners from His Holiness Dalai Lama. So those are the 3 retreats coming up. And so then that's it for this weekend's retreat. So let's finish with a dedication. And for dedication, one dedication I really like and I use a lot is a very well-known dedication from the great Indian master Shantideva from the 8th century. And so I'll read out the dedication, and if you'd like to also read out or just sit there quietly and listen, that's fine as well. So let's dedicate all the efforts we've accumulated through this weekend's retreat using the following verses from Shantideva. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Thank you. And so next retreat, hope to see you in 3 weeks' time, where we look at the compassion retreat. So until then, stay safe, stay well. Bye for now.